Welcome back. One day I'll tell you what they've been saying, but I can't say now. It might be too sensitive. But I want us to take a look at the history of the IEBC selection panel, where we've come from since 2011. You know that the IEBC Act is as old as 2011 under the new constitution. And one of the opening statements within the recruitment process of an IEBC commission is that within 14 days, the commencement of the IEBC, that is IEBC Act 2011, the President shall, in consultation with the Prime Minister, appoint a selection panel comprising the following. The President was to nominate 2 persons, that is President Kibaki, Prime Minister Odinga, 2 persons to the selection panel, the Judicial Service Commission, 1 person, and the Kenya Anti-Corruption Advisory Board, 1 person, then an Association of Professional Societies of East Africa, 1 person, and the outcome of that was Isaac Hassan Commission, that is in accordance with the law. And then there were amendments in 2016 that decided that the Parliamentary Service Commission was to produce 4 people, KCCB, that is the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, NCCK, Evangelical Association of Alliance of Kenya, Hindu Council of Kenya, 1 person each. SUPKEM, NAMLEF, CIPK were to produce 1 person jointly, and the total was 9 members in the selection panel. That gave us the Chebukati Commission in 2017. That also had been reduced to 7 commissioners. Then in 2019, there was an amendment to the law to have an 11-member panel, which is proposed to comprise of a PSC, the Parliamentary Service Commission, 4 people, Public Service Commission, the EACC, the Law Society of Kenya, the National Gender and Equality Commission, and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Each was to produce 1 person. The Interreligious Council, 2 people. The total would have been 11 members, but the Senate rejected that and has caused amendments to have the Parliamentary Service Commission producing 4 people, the Law Society of Kenya, 1 person, the Interreligious Council, 2 people, and the total of that was 7 members. The product of that was the Cherera 4 Commission. But now the High Court said that the Parliamentary Service Commission was dominating the selection panel, and so there was an amendment to the law that was pursued late last year by the majority side, this time Kenya Kwanza, to have the Parliamentary Service Commission producing a maximum of 2, the Public Service Commission 1, the Law Society of Kenya and the Political Parties Liaison Committee 1 person each, the Interreligious Council 2 people, and that produced Nelson Makanda team that has already advertised, received applications by 28th of March, and they were expected to go ahead and shortlist and conduct the interviews, but that didn't happen. We don't know whether that will happen because now there's that bipartisan team that is being comprised or constituted in Parliament to lead to these conversations. And Honorable Mbui, because it appears like it's straightforward. If it's about the selection panel, we've seen how it has evolved since 2011 to what it is now. So will your concerns about IEBC selection panel be resolved by just altering probably the number from 7 to 11 or 9 or whatever, and then having more people coming from the political systems, or what will resolve this?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Sam. I think when we reconstitute the selection panel, it will give us a chance to ensure that that process of selecting the commissioners is that team that does the work of selecting commissioners is comprised of individuals that are fairly balanced in terms of the 2 political party formations in the country. And because really what we were unhappy about is that the whole of that team was, in our opinion, skewed in favor of Kenya Kwanza. First, I can tell you that this is a political process. So you cannot leave the major political players out of it. And that is exactly what this selection panel has done. Because even on the matter of Parliamentary Service Commission, in essence, giving members, because previously there were 4, it would have been 2 from the Azimio side and 2 from the Kenya Kwanza side. But what has happened is that now the number was reduced to 2. But Parliamentary Service Commission, not the political parties within Parliament, Parliamentary Service Commission single-handedly made a decision. And remember, the commission, even Parliamentary Service Commission, democratically has more members of Kenya Kwanza than the ones of Azimio. So they made a decision. I think they advertised, got some individuals whom we don't even know. So I think the process required that Azimio sits and also presents a member to that commission, or 2 members. So we feel that the whole thing was skewed. Previously, we were supposed to. No, we haven't. This time we didn't. The Parliamentary Service Commission gave the membership. Azimio did not. Now, and I think even obviously both would have been skewed towards Kenya Kwanza. Now, again, look at the Public Service Commission has been introduced to be able to also give, you know, a member to this panel. Now, the Public Service Commission basically is part of the executive, works directly under the president. So how can they make a decision independent of the executive? So for us, we feel that the selection panel was already skewed. And I think that's why even Kenya Kwanza, in their wisdom, realized that they couldn't get away with it. And they've agreed that we have discussions around that topic so that we can come up with a selection panel that is fair. In the US, for example, when you're accused and taken to court, they have this jury system where they take people to be able to make a decision on the final verdict. Now, what happens is that the 2 competing councils are allowed an opportunity to make a decision on who can sit in that jury and who cannot. And I think that's exactly what we want, to be given an opportunity to be able to say this person cannot be a commissioner because we know that they will probably be playing to the tune of Kenya Kwanza. And they will also get an opportunity to reject any of the people we propose. So I think the selection panel is critical, Sam, and I think these bipartisan talks can actually resolve that.
So if the High Court already said that you cannot have Parliamentary Service Commission having 4 out of 7, which is more than majority, so what will you do? What are the options that you have?
You know, Sam, the reason, let me tell you, we are not made so that we serve the laws. The laws are made so that they can serve us. And for me, I think for the High Court to even make a decision and say that we cannot have political players handling a political process, I think that for me was already a blunder. And let me say that there is nothing that is, there is no decision made by a court of law that cannot be overturned. Even that
no one has appealed against it.
Yeah, but you see, that's why we want, that's the reason why we want to sit as Parliament and be able to make a decision on that particular matter. So once we make a decision, some days, there are times I ask myself, why is there always conflict in some cases when Parliament makes a decision, passes a law, and then a court of law sits and says this is not correct? Because Parliament has the mandate by the people to be able to sit and decide what can work for the country. So for me, I think when we pass a law, this business of the courts continuously shutting down and sending back laws to the House, I think is wrong. Because we cannot, both of us, make laws. Parliament makes a law. The courts are supposed to interpret the law.
Okay. Honorable Koech, do you have a proposed solution? Because if 4 out of 7 is the problem and that would appear what Azimio's side would be in favor of, then how do you get out of that?
First, you realize that the president has backpedaled on a constitutional process to allow and accommodate, like I said earlier, to accommodate the views from Azimio and their concern. This is akin to a football match where one team has perpetually ganged up against the referee. It's always the same result. Let me tell you, this is a product of IEBC amendment bill in last parliament. We debated, and it was bullied through by the previous regime and the Handshake brothers, because that is what they wanted. Okeya Omtata went to court. When Okeya Omtata went to court, because parliament had an undue advantage, but because we were close to election, nonetheless, the court allowed that they can serve that term, but we have to relook at it. With the same team that even we, at that time in Kenya Kwanza, did not feel comfortable with, we went to an election. And the results were announced, and William Ruto won against all what was perceived to be a team that was allied to the other side. And that is what you see of the product of Cherera 4. If it were up to me, Sam, I'll tell you one thing. You should totally disallow politicians from participating in selection of those who will be in the IEBC panel. Because number one, what are we doing with Arifari? You know, all of us are a product of IEBC. Why will we want to have our hand on an election process? It has nothing to do with us. But now, since that is what they want, it is okay. All we are saying is that if this is what will give peace to this country, let us give Azimio what they want. Because at the end of the day, and people should have this in their mind, election is not decided by IEBC. It is not. Election are decided by the people of Kenya. People should go out and campaign and get their votes on the ground. What we are talking about here is just creating mistrust and apprehension in the country for an unnecessary reason. Because even if Robert Mbui today is made the IEBC commissioner, what will he do to change the results? What can he do? People believe, you know, and there's this myths of, oh, there's a server, there are some brilliant fellows who will interfere with the election here and there. There's a Davis Chichir somewhere there. Myths that don't exist. Elections are won in polling stations. We are all products of elections. Robert Mbui is serving his third term because he's been elected by his people, not because of some server and an imaginary election masculation by some individual somewhere. So for me, I do not care what they want. Let us have a constitutional process. If that discussion is constitutional, it is okay. There's a court ruling, and if they are saying now we go back, which we've backpedaled against, by the way, someone can even go to court because we are backpedaled to allow these guys to catch up with us and give their names of who they feel they want. And I think, rightfully, Robert did say, I think probably this is the only thing that we'll agree with, is that let the bipartisan team then engage. If they feel that they want to give two or one name, it is perfectly okay. Everyone had given their name, say for them. So if that will allow them now to come to some sort of understanding, and we have that team formed and given out, so be it.
But you don't have a cap on how many there should be? Out of 7 panelists, you don't have a number?
Then it will involve an amendment. It will again involve an amendment in Parliament. Already there's a number that we are supposed to have.
That's what I'm saying, because at the moment it's 7.
It is 7, yeah.
They are complaining that you reduce Parliamentary Service Commission from 4 to 2, which they feel it's to the disadvantage of the political players.
But it was a court ruling, sir.
Yes, so I'm looking for the solution.
There's no solution. The court ruled that, and you saw it, what happened. You know, Cherera 4 was a product of this kind of amendment, which I think still think that it was wrong. So there's nothing we can do about it. The court has ruled in that favor. To me, let me say, they can change the names, but the numbers should remain the same.
Honorable Wako, what are your thoughts to fixing that? Because after every election, that act has been amended, even how you compose the selection panel. It reduced from 11 members to 9 members, now to 7 members, but there's still that conflict of involvement of the political players in the exercise because there's that feeling that the president of the day has an upper hand. How do you resolve this in these bipartisan talks?
We are yet to get into the business, but business of bipartisan, because immediately we form and they start off the work, that is when we will know their mandate and everything. But proper amendments can still be made. Proper amendments can still be made within the 90 days, and the president is flexible, and that is why he said, let us go bipartisan way. If there was anyone who has been disadvantaged, it is our current president in our last election, because everything was against us and we were so scared. But by the grace of God and the power that has been bestowed in the people of Kenya, we were able to overcome all the challenges and we won the election. So if we won, we are not even worried, even if all the 7 members can be Azimio team, by the way. As Kenya Kwanza, we are not worried, because the future belongs to God, and our president is flexible. And before I conclude, I just want us to just reflect on the past. And we need to be guided by what has been happening. Because during the Isaac Hassan time, the opposition, without that team, somehow belonged to them. But the opposition, you remember how the demonstrations were done and they brought a lot of chaos in the country. During Chebukati's time, the situation was even worse. Today, we are on the same game. And it is like this has become a culture. And it is unfortunate that we have made some practice to become our culture, which is not right. Right now, we are arguing, we are debating, and we need to have the IEBC team in place. And what is dragging us is this back and forth. The best thing that we can do, we are to have 7, and even if Azimio will have 4, and our side will have 3, I think we have no problem. As I said, the future belongs to God. Number 1, out of the 7, the 4 belongs to Parliamentary Service Commission. That is where the debate is. I'm sure we will be guided by the bipartisan and interreligious. Even if we give interreligious council 3, because we all belong to this group, even if we give them 3, and then we have 1 as from the Parliamentary Service Commission. I know amendments has to be done, but as Kenya Kwanza, our president is flexible to make these people happy so that Kenya moves on, because wametusumbua, and it is high time for us to tell them, please, we need to progress.
Okay. Senator Sotsi, so if that is done, what she's proposing, does that resolve the question about the selection panel, even as you focus on the other issues that you had enumerated?
Sam, let me start by explaining the global best practice in the matter of election management and selection of electoral management agencies. The global practice in the US, Europe, is that political parties are a key players in the process of selection of election management agency. And that is contrary to what my good friend Nelson here is saying, that parties, political players must not be involved in the process of selection. I think political parties must be fully involved. And even the idea of giving slots to Parliamentary Service Commission, you know, there were 4 and now there are 2, is informed by that thinking, that parties need to have adequate representation in the process of recruitment of election commissioners. That happens in other countries. There is no problem. And even in this country, I think if we may recall that the best election that we have had as a country is 2002 election. The election that brought in Mwai Kibaki as a president. And that election was largely successful because of the process of constituting the election management agency, the electoral commission by then. We had what we call IPPG, which was a process that was driven by Parliament then, but with a lot of stakeholder input, engagement. And they agreed and said, this is the process we want, and these are the commissioners we want. And that's why we had the most successful election we have ever had. That is what we are asking. Can we have a process that is going to involve all players so that we don't leave this process to one player alone? Because you cannot be a player and at the same time you are influencing who is going to be the referee, who is going to be the linesman. Then that game is not going to be a competitive game. So we hope that this process of bipartisan, one of the things that it should seek to achieve is to ensure that we have an acceptable process by political players in the choice of the IEBC commissioners. I think that's the minimum. If you look at the law as it stands now, the law that was passed in the one that created this selection committee, you look at the process that it was handled. First of all, it was passed in the National Assembly without any amendments. The debate was rushed During that time when members of parliament had gone to Yala Games in Sudan, they came to parliament and rushed through, bulldozed it through. It came to the Senate. Senate, we, on the Azimio side, we wanted to make amendments to that law. The report was tabled. The report that was tabled was a report that was reflecting some of the views of Azimio. Then mysteriously, the report was withdrawn and another one tabled, contrary to the law, to the standing orders. And that's why Okiya Omtata is in court, questioning the process. And then they use the numbers to bulldoze through that piece of legislation. And you know, the best practice is that when you talk about election, when you talk about the laws around election, they must be negotiated. They must be negotiated. But if you have one party that is trying to push through and getting things done their way, then you get to a situation where we are now at the moment. So for us as Azimio, we are saying, let us have a process that is going to involve all the key players in the election process in a more democratic way, in a more involving way, in a more inclusive way, without
let me get
rushing people through.
She gave us her suggestion that PAC can retain one person. The Interreligious Council may have 3. I don't know what happens to the last one, or the LSK retains it.
But even that...
what is your formula?
But even that PAC, from the explanation by my good friend Mbui, that process was not open.
No, I'm asking, moving on into the future.
Moving on to the future, we are saying the whole architecture should be changed. In fact, my view is that we need to go back to the IPPG arrangement. IPPG is the best model that has ever worked for this country. And I think those who are on the negotiation team must reflect on...
Would it work in the current terms of the new constitution, where you don't want dominance of any faction in such an independent commission?
You see, election is about people involved in politics.
But it's also about the people of Kenya.
Yeah, but it's also people involved in politics. And the people involved in politics are organized around political parties. Even those other organizations, they have political rights under Article 38 of the Constitution. So they have freedom to belong to any political party they want to belong to. Okay. So the central players in this game is political parties.
Okay, all right. I think that's why you need the bipartisan talks to turn out